And back to the political front, NASA leaders today lead their campaigns in Kajiado County, where they will seek to woo local voters there ahead of the October 17th repeat presidential poll. The principals will be led by candidate Raila Odinga, and earlier on they did attend a church service there in Isinya. But let's cross over to Kajiado County and listen in to what's going on there.
Mheshimiwa Raila Omolo Odinga katika mji Kenya. Sana. Tarehe 8 wakazi wa mji huu walikupigia kura kabisa. Sisi tungelipenda kusema sasa tarehe 17 tutajitokea kwa wingi kumpigia Mheshimiwa Rais mtarajiwa Raila Omolo Odinga kura kwa wingi.
Our reporter Rita Tinina is on the NASA campaign trail and will be joining us with more details from there later on. But for now, Brian Mutia, political commentator, joins me in studio. Many thanks for joining us on Weekend at 1, Brian.
Thank you, Michelle.
So, political campaigns have hit fever pitch in the country. Who thought? But give some context into this, because we're seeing NASA now head to Kajiado. And just before the August 8th elections, they did hold several rallies in Kajiado County. What is it about this county that is of so much interest to NASA? Absolutely.
Remember very well, Michelle, that Kajiado has been dominantly or traditionally an ODM zone or Raila's, space for him to warm. And he has actually gained a lot previously. And this time around, he seemed not to be at a loss on what could have happened actually by losing one key governor, Gentianye. Of course, this went to Olelengu. And this actually shows that the Ma community is very vulnerable, having traditionally backed Raila and all that, and now things seem to be gravitating towards Jubilee. So he has to rush there and make that kind of efforts to see the loopholes that perhaps might have, made things not go the way they are. And I want to say that the Ma community, just like other community, is a vulnerable community this time around. The beauty of it is that both Jubilee and NASA had an opportunity to do a mock sort of a reference point by having the previous elections cancelled. So they know how the ground looks like. They know how things are, and they know where to capitalize on, and they know where to, not to capitalize on. For example, I will tell you that the Ma community is an area that Raila would not want to see it going back to Jubilee. And another area, of course, will be the Kisii, and I want that to be a topic for another discussion.
Absolutely.
It's very fascinating for political analysts to discuss, owing to the fact that Maraga, of course, has been actually in the forefront, speculating issues and saying things that perhaps did not, having done things that did not go well down with the NASA fraternity.
With the NASA team. But of course, many have also raised the fact that Justice Lenaola, representing the Ma community, also being called Mkora, would play into that. But let's take a look at the trends, because so far we've seen the Jubilee Party pretty much holding a charm offensive in what would be termed as NASA's strongholds. And that has been billed by political commentators as a smart move, because it is almost guaranteed that their strongholds will vote for them anyway. Is this a strategy that NASA is adopting, would you say?
It is a strategy both teams are adopting, because they have actually tested the ground and they have seen how the results, how their previous outcomes actually looked like. And therefore, this is a time now they want to ensure that they get numbers where perhaps they did not get according to how they expected. And now that's why you can see Jubilee now going to Machakos to pitch camp there, having having a point man in Machakos in the name of Governor Mutua, who perhaps we all know that is actually so much inclined towards the Jubilee wing. And therefore, every team, every wing is trying to ensure that they pick at least some components here and there and eat up from their opponent's side. And this is actually a trend that we are likely to be treated into towards the end of these elections. And therefore, the aim is to ensure that they consolidate and at the same time eat from the opponent's pot.
Right, and how difficult or how easy would it be for them to consolidate this support, considering the current Kajiado governor, now one Joseph Olelengu, elected on a Jubilee ticket, then, initially, many thought Kajiado is an ODM stronghold. Many thought Anke Dianye would be re-elected. How would you explain that?
Well, although this is a matter in the court, because I understand that Dianye went to the court, of course, to ensure that he gets a sort of court redress. So maybe until the court decides that it's purely Lenku who actually won, when we can mention that. But by commenting from the status quo as things they are right now, assumably, is that, yes, things have tilted. The scales have really tilted and the ground is not so friendly to NASA. Right. And this is an area that Raila has always been just thumping that this is for me, for grabs for me, as NASA is concerned. But having seen things gravitating or slipping off from his hand, he has to ensure that he goes there with a lot of speed, and he has to change the tone and articulate matters which are going to hit the hearts of the Ma community, the matters of land. And you could hear yesterday he talked about issues of the Mau, matters of land, matters of the resettlement, right, and all that. So he has to ensure that he repackages his message to a way that he endears the Ma community deeper than he did before. And that's why he's actually choosing his words very carefully to ensure that the words that he's using and to the people are words that are going to resonate with the people.
All right. Now, earlier on, Raila Odinga, leading the NASA team in Kajiado, did speak at Isinya, where he attended a church service. And while addressing the press, he addressed the issue of the controversial pay bill number that has received a lot of criticism from the Jubilee side. But interesting enough is that the pay bill number has gained quite a bit of traction, more than $1 billion already in.
Yes.
Despite the criticism, how would you explain that reaction from the public?
I think we have to understand that we are operating within a very saturated political environment, and such words, you will hear them actually, some of them discrediting and others crediting the move. But I want to tell you that even in developed democracies, candidates do not raise their own funds from their pockets, or they do not actually take money from their businesses or enterprises to run campaigns, but essentially they gain money from public and their supporters and other well-wishers as well as foundations. Therefore, the move by NASA is still within the realms of democracy, because when you look at the amount of that Obama, for example, had prior to his campaigns in the US, it was not enough for him to actually ensure that he actually operates smoothly as far as his campaigns are concerned. And therefore, he had to look for money here as well. He had to lobby from well-wishers. He had to lobby from activists who are supporting his agenda and cause. And therefore, for NASA to do the same, it's quite in order. It's only that we are operating in a very saturated political landscape. And therefore, you are going to hear a lot of push and pull for people trying to discredit their move. Yet, it is a move which is actually the ideal move for this country as far as fundraising is concerned. In fact, Jubilee should be challenged to adopt the same model and endear themselves to well-wishers, supporters, charity organizations, and other well-wishers or businesses for that matter, to ensure that they also take the same move and ensure that they show us how they are also getting their money. This is what democracy is all about.
Right, so we'll keep keeping an eye and taking a look at how much they raise in the next coming days. But let's focus now on the other side of the political divide. Jubilee is in Machakos, just 2 days after NASA went to Machakos. And this also comes just a day after a section of Ukambani leaders pledged their support for President Uhuru Kenyatta's re-election. Once again, an area termed as a NASA stronghold, witnessing quite a lot of defections and turbulence there. What are the stakes?
Absolutely. Of course, Jubilee has to do that today so that they still maintain the momentum that was created yesterday by the professional body that came out yesterday to ensure, to show support to the Jubilee fraternity. Right. And you could see yesterday that the climate was very positive for Jubilee through the brokers, the power brokers, and also supporters of Jubilee in Ukambani, led by one Peter Mudhoka. And one statement that they were actually sending out there is that as much as we have perceived Ukambani to be a NASA stronghold, this time things are gravitating, our things are in a way that any team can go there and get some votes. Right. And you remember what Jubilee did in the just concluded election, although it went berserk, things did not go as NASA expected. Of course, they expected it to have sealed all the loopholes for Jubilee to have something. But Jubilee doubled up the numbers in Ukambani. Remember in 2013, Jubilee had 89,000 votes. This time around, they got over 150,000 votes from the entire Ukambani. And that shows that things, the zone, or the Ukambani zone, is a little bit vulnerable. And if anybody endears himself proper to the community there, he can still get something bigger than what they have gotten this time around.
Right, right. And even as those campaigns continue, just comparing the Jubilee and NASA campaign trails, there are those who are of the view that while Jubilee is campaigning, NASA shouldn't really be following suit, but staying on the ground and focusing on logistics, which are largely part of their complaints, even with the Supreme Court petition. Would you agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that, because this is a political competition. You match your opponent even. If he makes a move, you make another one. If you make a move, you counter that particular move, politically speaking. And therefore, for somebody to say that NASA should just sit down and work out on issues to do with their, logistics, it doesn't make any sense. Because even their zone or the people, even the administrators or the kingpins within the Jubilee, the NASA fraternity, are vulnerable. And we are seeing some defections. We have seen yesterday and today we are likely to see more defections. And one person I'm actually having my eyes on is actually this person in Omar Hassan in the kind of the next move that is likely to make. But I would not be surprised him having defected from Wiper. I would not be surprised to see him actually pitching his camp in the Jubilee, because Jubilee has actually been looking for someone at the coastal region whom they can utilize as a point man, as a hitman at the coastal region to drive the agenda, the Jubilee manifesto. That person has been missing. And if Omar Hassan actually makes that bold move to join Jubilee, then Jubilee will have actually, caught one of the biggest fish as far as politics of today is concerned at defection.
An interesting one there.
Very interesting.
Let's head to Naivasha. Interesting developments there. IEBC commissioners and secretariat officials will be holding a retreat there. Top of the agenda is to iron out the issues we've seen play out in the public in the past week or two. A lot of division. But even yesterday, we had Commissioner Roslyn Akombe say she was not aware of any retreat happening in Naivasha today. What really could be happening within this commission?
I think the problem is that the IEBC, the current IEBC, the problem is that most of the officials, the secretariat and the commissioners became partisan in the sense that they chose to support one side, not because of their choice, but because there are a lot of machinations, a lot of underground moves that takes place as far as controlling the personalities who manage elections, not in Kenya, but everywhere in this country. But because these fellas perhaps did not stamp the authority and they showed that decisiveness, that kind of neutrality, that kind of impartiality. That's why they became vulnerable. And you could hear one of commissioners saying that things are not rosy within their commission's operations, because whenever they hold meetings, some of commissioners will pick their phone calls and move out of their boardrooms in terms of going to pick phone calls from some quarters who perhaps are influencing the decisions that they are likely to make. And therefore, the problem with this IEBC is that the commissioners and even the secretariat are not talking, are not seeing things in the same direction. And of course, this is something that we all know that is not something of today. It's not a problem that we are seeing primarily being a problem of the current IEBC. Even the Kivuitu Commission, Isaac Kazan Commission, they had a secretariat which was not seeing eye to eye or was not seeing things the same as the commission. And therefore, this was a recipe for chaos. And that's why things are going the way they are. But one piece of advice that I would want to give to this IEBC commission is that they need to sit down and sort their house. They need to put their act together, because Kenyans and the world at large are watching how they are behaving. And a commission, as a country, we cannot afford a commission which cannot even, is not even friendly within itself.
Right, charity begins at home.
Charity begins at home. If they want the undertones to go down a little bit, if they want the simmerings to within the political space to go a little bit down, or to be a little bit, perceived to be working, they have also to show the way forward that they are a unit and they are working together for the good cause of this country.
Right.
We cannot afford to see a disarray sort of commission where Chiloba is pulling on this direction when the chairman is also pulling at the other direction. We are not going to be appeased by a situation where we are seeing 4 commissioners pulling on one direction and the 5 pulling on the other side. This commission has to show this country that they are an item and they are a solid item to move the agenda of this country forward.
And of course, other than the internal divisions, external pressure continues to mount. Before the August 8th election, there was a lot of legal battles between IEBC and the opposition, NASA, and the bigger perception was that IEBC enjoyed a lot of support from the executive and from the Jubilee Party. But after the Supreme Court decision and after one Chebukati's letter to CEO Chiloba, the favor doesn't seem to be so good. It doesn't seem to be enjoying so much support from the Jubilee side. But NASA also has their demands, and they say they will not go to the polls with Chiloba as the CEO. On the other side, Jubilee want Chebukati to resign. I mean, how are they likely to handle this pressure in a way that satisfies both parties?
This is a huge, sort of equation to solve, in the sense that while Jubilee wants Chebukati, but the beauty of Chebukati, Michelle, let me correct you. The beauty of Chebukati is actually he has posed himself to be the neutral party here, in the sense that he's trying to appeal to both NASA and also to Jubilee. Right. But Chiloba seems to be the subject matter here, where NASA wants him out, and Raila has been on the record that he will not participate in the 17th election if Chiloba is not out of that secretariat. Well, this is an issue that perhaps the chairman has to stamp his authority. And from the Naivasha retreat that's happening today in Michelle, we would expect to see some white smoke in terms of tandem in the way this secretariat and the commission are singing together. When the commission, the secretariat are coming out of that Naivasha retreat in unison or talking in one voice, then Jubilee and NASA will say, look here, these guys are talking. These guys are now an item. They are seeing this on the same perspective. Let's give them the opportunity to do what Article 88 of the Constitution mandates them to do. And that's to ensure that they conduct elections in this country in a free, fair, and a credible manner.
All right. And finally, speaking of elections, it is one of the issues that we'll also be strategizing on. And top of the agenda is, where will the ballot papers be printed? Who will print these ballot papers? Which institutions will oversee the tallying, voting, and transmission of results? In your view, as a political analyst, what solution, what recommendation would you give to the IEBC?
I'm afraid to say that I had one Chiloba, Ezra, saying that the printing will still be done by Al Ghurair, a controversial firm that was actually mandated to do this job. But while I'm not comfortable with that move, because Chiloba has used that this organization or this institution or this enterprise as a 2-year working contract with the government or with the IEBC, I do not want to say that is a right move for him to say it so, because this is a botched election process. And this being a process, it calls for dialogue from the two parties to ensure that they are comfortable with a situation where they are saying, look here, we had a problem with the printer, the previous Al Ghurair as a printer. Can we have another firm that is going to ensure that they print the ballots for us? Because that is a marked person. Al Ghurair is a marked institution. It is not appealing to both sides. Right. Let's have a situation where perhaps we can have dialogue prevailing by having the two sides of the coin, two sides of the divide, NASA and the Jubilee sitting down and agreeing on the way forward, whether to choose Al Ghurair. To me, I have some reservations. They need to come up with a neutral printing firm which will appeal to both sides, because I do not want to see a situation where either side is actually throwing tantrums simply because Al Ghurair had the opportunity to reprint the ballot papers again.
All right. Thank you so much, political